Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're live from Los Angeles, a little bit of a different setup today um, because I have to really play around with the screen, or rather pull up constantly different things, and I didn't want to bend over. It gives me backache. You guys know I'm aging and aging quite terribly at that, so I'm gonna try to have a different kind of setup today. Hopefully, we'll still manage. We are gonna mainly talk about the competing watches at the GPHG, the so-called Oscars of horology, Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève. But as always, I'm gonna start with warming up a little bit, talk about some of the things that I've posted over the last day or two on Instagram. There's always interesting stuff there, and you guys know, even though sometimes people very quickly categorize what I do as watch spotting on Instagram, it's actually quite different. And if you bother to read the captions and look at the subjects I choose, you will easily know that, of course. And I count on that really with some of my regular viewers. Um, you guys know, again, I don't care much about basketball. I certainly don't know anything about the NBA, but I do know that the Oklahoma City Thunder won last season, and that their hottest player was Shai Gilgeous Alexander, or Gilgis. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Let's call him simply Shai, which is actually his Instagram handle. And he was the season MVP and the finals MVP. And I know that he's usually talked about as possessing this aura, which was very much present when he attended the ESPYs, ESPN's award ceremony for the year's top athletes. And he did win the best male athlete award there. He was dressed from head to toe in Ferragamo, and he had these Ferrari announcement vibes when Lewis Hamilton was posing in Maranello. Um, kind of a full suit with a double-breasted jacket in this case, and a nice big coat, which is slightly oversized, but I suppose it could actually fit quite well. But I like that slung over shoulder kind of look. The watch he was wearing, of course, I think was the highlight for me, at least. In this generation of Audemars Piguet open worked watches, I think there are pieces that are perhaps more desirable, more aspirational for the average AP customer. But in the past, it was usually the jumbo open worked pieces, and I'm going to pull up an example from the past, from history, so to speak, in a moment. But the jumbo open worked was actually very popular, and here he chose basically a tone-on-tone example of that, and there's that dichotomy or those binary of options that AP provides in this generation, whether we are talking about the double balance open worked or the jumbo open worked. With the precious metal versions, there's always one that has this more industrial look with the blackened open worked bridges, and then there's more of a tone-on-tone look, which echoes with the shade of the metal used. And in this case, it's yellow gold, and you have gold-toned bridges for the open working. And I think it was an amazing choice, precisely because he's wearing something so classical to the point that it's almost conservative, from the black Oxfords to the full suit with a crisp white shirt. It's the gold watch just does everything here, and for something like the Jumbo, which is actually in and of itself quite a discreet watch, being 39 millimeters in diameter, being an ultra thin piece. So immaculate choice here. Whether he came up with it all by himself in terms of the watch choice I'm talking about, because obviously he has a stylist, which is someone I note here, Yashua Simmons. It's just impeccable. It's really an amazing piece. The one that I wanted to share with you from the past, from perhaps one of the most desirable pieces ever. This is something that I always wanted to have, but I think I long missed the boat on this one. The previous generation's anniversary piece, it goes by 15203 PT. It's a platinum piece, and compared to today's Jumbo open work, it's much more of a plain Jane watch, if that's ever possible. But it has that exposed date wheel that wraps around the center of the dial that I always somehow liked, right? The transparent crystal they used there for that wheel. Of course, for all intents and purposes, this is a 15202 in platinum with an open worked movement. This was a piece that was actually released on the 40th anniversary, so exactly in 2012, right, with the refreshed 15202 reference that completely aspired to look like the original Jumbo with minimal differences. So it was quite a treat at that time, and because it was the 40th anniversary edition, it was made in only 40 examples. And the last time I saw one of these for sale, which was already a few years ago, they were already in the range of 200,000, $250,000, and I imagine that has only gone up. And again, don't really appear in the market all that often to begin with. This is an example that the Keystone sold a few years back. And as you can see, it does have a customized rotor. I mean, essentially, it's the same rotor as the Jumbo that was renewed in 2012 on the 40th anniversary, but it does have those dates inscribed, right? 1972, which is when Gerard Janta's original design was introduced, and 2012, which is when it celebrated its 40th anniversary. And you can see here, it's one of 40 pieces. But yeah, that's probably my favorite open-worked Royal Oak watch ever, although obviously it goes well beyond the term aspirational, or even, yeah, I mean, this would be a holy grail, right? In the sense that it is practically unachievable, something that you might only, fantasize about in terms of acquiring or reaching. We were looking at a couple of the pieces that I posted from the SP Awards. By the way, I have a very humble goal of 5 super chats. for tonight for the first hour. About 45 minutes left. So I might actually continue for the second hour. Just $2 and higher will get you there. Aussie Expat 2, is it really that much nicer than your RO already? You know, my RO is a very, very humble one. That's on a leather strap. That's 36 millimeter. I do want to. I don't know whether we are talking about this open worked or the 15203 PT. But of course, I mean, both are quite nice. But honestly, I would be fine with a 15202. You know, 15202 in steel, you know, early series, the I serial, if I'm not mistaken, from around 2012, early 2013, the 40th anniversary. That's more than enough for me. I don't necessarily aspire to something like this or the double balance open worked, mostly because, again, for my weight, for my quote unquote wealth, those are above my pay grade. So it is what it is. But yeah, I find them quite desirable. If money were no object, I would chase after stuff like that. Old school Royal Oak perpetual calendars, in all sorts of different metals, open worked, etc. I like it. Yeah, if money were no object, I think I would build an entire collection of just Royal Oaks, honestly. Another, I would not sell all and get 15202. I don't know if that's a test to see whether I want it all that much. But that's not how I look at it. I'm actually a collector, much like you, Ozzy, that I like having all these different watches that I can call my own without flipping through them, um, owning them at the same time, enjoying the different things they bring to my life, um, different designs that I can wear with different outfits towards different purposes. I enjoy that. If I wish I were, someone from 2, 3 generations ago, like my father, who had just one good watch and a few throwaways here and there, but you know, his one Rolex Submariner was enough for him. I wish I was exactly like that, and I could be fine with just having a jumbo. Um, for me, that's not it. I don't think I can. I don't think I can do it. I will regret it instantly. Oh yeah, it will be. It will be completely forgivable. But you are trying to reason out a conversation about something that does not abide by reason. What's that? What's that famous um, saying? I think I'm blanking out. I'm pretty sure it was Pascal who said something like, the heart has its reasons that reason does not know. Um, so it's kind of like that. You understand? Obviously, you make a lot of sense. You can. It's fine. Like, I have a lot of friends in the cigar lounge that, independent of the outfit, my friend Ben always wears his Monaco. He does, in fact, have two Hoya Monacos, right? One, the classic blue dial, one with the Gulf livery, but he mostly wears the blue dial. and independent of what his outfit is, which is of course much less pretentious than mine. Yeah, I have another friend, Sergio, who almost invariably wears his classic day date with a black dial set with diamonds. You know, he has one or two other watches that he has in rotation, probably more than that, but I rarely see him with anything other than the day date. And I wish, again, I wish I belonged to that generation. I wish I hadn't already spent more than 2 decades, you know, studying watches, researching them, and talking about them. But my mind is already gone, right? I can't rewind it back to that time where I would be happy with that one watch. Although, again, with the collection I have, I think once I have the jumbo, I really won't have any immediate desires. You know, that's what I discovered, right? Because up until I got my 14800, I got my Royal Oak that I have today, which I really love. I used to always look for another watch. Now when I look for watches, whether it's actual, you know, price shopping for a client, trying to source it for a client, or whether I'm going through pictures, current or historical, there's no personal desire in it for me anymore. And I like that. I like that, but it's not, again, there is an underbelly or undercurrent of greed that has gotten me already to, you know, basically a dozen watches until I got to that point. Going back to the SPs, by the way, guys, there's something going on my Instagram. So if you could pull up these links for the Instagram posts that I'm talking about, hit the like and you know, even leave a comment. It would be really amazing. John C says, why doesn't Breguet sponsor F1 drivers? John C, I know that you have a very special connection to Breguet, and you're bound to bring it up in one context or another, basically every night. And I actually like it. Don't worry, I'm not complaining about it. Pardon me. But beyond Breguet, I want to say that Swatch Group, when they ally their brands with certain sports or activities, have this pinpoint precision almost. Of course, they talk a lot about Breguet's history in aviation, etc., when it comes to the Type 20, and when it comes to actually the history of the family itself, when they moved away from watchmaking. But when Breguet sponsors an event, it's usually an art-related event, right? Whether, you know, I don't know how successful of a placement that is for them. I don't know whether it actually brings them more customers or whether it pleases their existing collectors. But I know for a fact that's what they chase, right? You know, when there's Freeze, for example, the art show, the yearly art show that happens in a few different cities. It happens on a yearly basis in Los Angeles as well. Breguet always has events associated to that and has their own, you know, pavilion, so to speak, in that exhibition, just like art galleries do, right? That's their shtick. That's their lane. Longines, for example, has a lot of relationships with equestrian sports. Omega has, of course, the Olympics, right? And by and large, with Olympic sports in general, with diving, same with Blancpain, sea, saving the ocean, so on and so forth. So when you have so many companies, I think, within the body of one giant conglomerate, they like that division of labor. And they probably have many other brands that they would dedicate towards motorsports. Maybe I'm already blanking on one that's heavily invested in motorsports, but they probably have other brands that they would push towards motorsports before they do Breguet. Just like LVMH chose Tag Heuer and certainly not Bulgari to become the official timekeeper of Formula One, right? They also didn't choose Zenit. Thank you. Ozzy, I'm loving this actually, because I have an axe to grind, but you say these things much more openly than I do. Absolutely not. I think that's a Travis Scott thing. Shai is an exemplary athlete. I don't think he has anything that would hold him back. And again, I don't even know if he is actually sponsored by AP or not. Possibly, I wouldn't know in this instance because I haven't looked into it. But yes, he's not an ambassador to that level. Speaking of AP, though, here is another athlete that they at least have a relationship with, and this is the Team USA gymnast and Olympic legend Simone Biles, who actually carried home not one but 2 awards from the 2025 ESPYs. She won the Best Female Athletes and Best Athlete and Best Championship Performance. I really liked her outfit to the point that I had to do some research on it, and apparently she's sponsored for her athletic gear by Athleta, and they basically commissioned the designer Zach Posen to make a gown that is made with the same material as her sparkling leotards. So it's quite gorgeous, and I like the fact that she paired that up with one of these relatively new mini Royal Oaks that have that frosted gold finish that first entered into AP's offerings through their collaboration with Carolina Bucci, and it looks gorgeous with the sparkles of that gown. It is the reference 67630 BC. Shai was wearing 16204 BA. And obviously, Royal Oak has an entire history of more feminine iterations. Already in 1976, they released something they called the Royal Oak 2. It was actually designed by Jacqueline Dimier, who was one of the proteges of Janta. Herself, head of design at AP for an extended period of time. That was a 29 millimeter watch, so somewhat larger than this piece, but it had an automatic movement. And then with Emmanuel Guet in 1997, they also had another model that was a 20 millimeter piece, and that was also a self-winding watch. This one is quartz powered, which is the only drawback. Hi, Robert. SPs are yearly awards given to best athletes. Aussie Expat says Shai Gilgeous Alexander is an upstanding gentleman. I looked him up. Maybe Rolex should snap him. Well, Rolex can't have everybody, but they have that appetite, right? Compared to, again, other brands we were talking about earlier. Rolex basically goes after anyone and everyone who they consider to be best in the field. So they do certainly have that appetite, especially now, right? I was thinking aloud a few episodes back when to see whether they are trying to fill a void that's left behind by Roger Federer's retirement. And certainly they are also trying to transform him into something larger than a retired athlete. And he is, in fact, of course, larger than that. But I don't think it is a coincidence that after he retired, they went out of their way to, to go after Leonardo DiCaprio, so on and so forth. Yeah, I don't think that was it. I think Tom Cruise started appearing with more and more Rolex watches as well, and I think that's a consciously cultivated relationship. I think there's a reason that they are foregrounding Tiger again. I don't think all of these things are a coincidence. Certainly, Rolex should go after, I think, at least one NBA player who would happily wear some of their watches. Robert Wood, it's so nice to see you, man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. By the way, please hit the like. I would really appreciate that. This is the Olympic legend Simone Biles, who is wearing a white gold version of the mini Royal Oak with the frosted finish. And again, for me, the only drawback for this generation of mini Royal Oaks is the quartz movement. Although, I will give them, I will shoot them some bail, as people say in slang. Perhaps because this is so strictly marketed towards women, a lot of brands have that common sense in their minds that women are less fussy about mechanical watches, and they actually prefer having the ease, the facility of wearing something that they don't need to, set every time they pick up. So it is what it is, but it's a beautiful looking watch, and it exists in all three shades of gold: pink, yellow, and white. All right, so it's time to actually head into our main topic of the night, which is not the ESPYs, but another award show that's going to happen in November in Geneva, the so-called Oscars of the watch world, Oscars of horology, GPHG, Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève. A few caveats before we begin. This has always been somewhat confusing about the way they announce the competition ahead of time. Of course, their main intent is to generate the discussions already and draw some attention onto it. But essentially, all the watches here in these categories 9, 12, in the 15 categories, right, are watches that people submitted for competition. And that only needs the filling out of a form and 800 Swiss francs. So if you submit your application in time and pay those $800, your watch will be listed in this long list of competing watches, right? That doesn't mean that these have gone through any selections yet. It doesn't mean that they have somehow been deemed worthy at this point, independent of how you might view this competition. And I have my own qualms about it that start with the simple fact that a lot of brands just don't compete, right? Francois Paul has felt hard done by the jury a couple of times before he stopped sending his watches. I don't think Swatch Group sends any watches. There might be some exceptions. Richemont, I think, except for Piaget and Van Cleef and Arpels in the mechanical and ladies segments, doesn't really send their watches. Who else? There are a couple of other brands. Rolex doesn't send any watches, even though they do always have a tutor within some of the strong entries and often winners. And having said that, that's also one of the main complaints, right? That they're really trying their best to spread things around and appease, especially the big cheese brands in the industry. Let's give a couple of awards to Tudor. Let's make sure that the LVMH group has at least an award to their name, so on and so forth. So sometimes part of the criticism is exactly that. Beyond that, they have some very commonsensical and also always very interesting categories. And in addition to these 15 categories that we will kind of weed through today, they also have additional categories. Of course, the actual grand prize is kind of above all categories. It's given to one watch that's chosen from the entire list of submissions. There's a chronometry category, once again, that's separate, and that's chosen. Beyond that, I think there's like an eco-conscious category. They have some more inventive categories that you may or may not be interested once the time for the actual award show comes around. But that's that for now. Julius Caesar says, I think IWC sent their eternal calendar. They did, and they also won, at least won something, right? But that was an exception. You're right to note that it was an exception. I don't think I have seen any IWC watches in this competition for a long time before, and there are certainly no IWC watches today. No Lange, no Vacheron either. No Cartier. It's just Van Cleef and Arpels that sometimes goes to mechanical clocks, sometimes has an entry or two for ladies. And that's where we will start as well. You'll also quickly note that while some of the ladies' watches might strike you as being more feminine, whether because they are quite diminutive or embellished quite a bit, sometimes they're just smaller sized versions of what could otherwise be seen as a men's watch or as a rather unisex watch. So there's always that caveat about the ladies / men's pieces as well. Without further ado, here are the competing watches in the ladies category, and that's, I think, a list of 27 pieces, so I'm not going to talk about them all. We were just talking about the white gold version of this, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Mini with the frosted gold finish, quartz-powered movement that was submitted. The pictures are quite high quality, and my internet connection really sucks these days, so I don't think we can actually go back and forth between these pages. So I'll try to just stick to this page. Close some of the stuff in the background, actually. So they have the yellow gold mini Royal Oak with the frosted gold finish, quartz-powered movement. They have the Arnold and Son Perpetual Moon, which has a very precise moon phase with an opening with a cutout that takes up basically the upper half of the dial, which is actually an aventurine dial. And I think the moon phase is precise for about 122 years with a deviation of only a single day. The piece is executed in white gold, 38 millimeters in diameter, and it's part of an 18-piece limited series, apparently, priced at 54,000 in Swiss francs, including the VAT. As you can see, it has an aventurine dial, that precise moon phase through a crescent-shaped, downward-facing crescent-shaped cutout in the upper half of the dial. The case in its entirety, almost, the lugs and the bezel, as well as the crown, is set with diamonds, and the hour markers themselves are also marquise cut, applied diamonds as well. The Artia piece is very interesting. I have to say, I have never really been into this particular brand, but they have they make a lot of sapphire glass watches. Here they have basically used Amazonite stone for the center dial, as well as the continuous seconds subdial that they placed near 12 o'clock. an open work look with a clear sapphire case. Again, this is the case diameter really that makes this watch, quote unquote, a lady's watch in this case, and that's 35 millimeters. And it's also a 99-piece limited edition. This is the Artia wavy sapphire micro rotor with the Amazonite dial. There's a Bulgari Serpenti Seritori. Again, I guess Serpenti overall is quite a feminine presenting watch. This also is a serpentine head that's set with 471 round brilliant cut diamonds, 7.91 carat altogether. The dial itself is set with 336 brilliant cut diamonds, and that's more than 1 carat as well. So quite a heavily gem set watch with an automatic movement. And this too is, of course, reflected in its price, which is 117,000 in Swiss francs. Jarajanta's Oursin, which they have revived as one of the first watches since they re-energized the brand under Louis Vuitton and their watch-making heaven, so to speak, in La Fabrique du Temps. This was one of the first watches that they started making in series. Of course, this Oursin means sea urchin, basically, and as you can see, the kind of decoration of the case itself, of the bezel specifically, is very unique and interesting. It's a 36.5 millimeter yellow gold case in diameter, and it's set with 137 individual fire opals around the dial. And the dial itself, in the old Janta way, and that was the case with one of the watches that we looked at yesterday in the auction, in the Jupiter Art of Time auction, it has a faceted dial, faceted crystal over the dial, which is very unique. And that dial in and of itself is orange cornelian, right? But the watch, it looks very much orange and fire opal like. This is the Gentissima Oursin, a 10-piece limited series, priced at 120,000 in Swiss francs. Please don't try to sell me something. Yeah, don't do that kind of stuff. I'm genuinely not interested. This is someone writing on Kick for one reason or another, which, just exists for the moment. I'm just trying to get it off the ground. So if you use Kick, if you have a Kick account, feel free to follow me there. Feel free to watch me from there. It It happens concurrently with the YouTube stream, and so you are not really losing out on anything. But yeah, it's still there. It exists. Another watch that I wanted to look at, you guys know that I like Denison, especially because I like the designer first and foremost. Emmanuel Guet, who is one of my favorite living watch designers, has penned the case, which has a classic cushion shape, very sleek watch. I think quite affordable in its segments. It has a quartz movement, which I don't know. I'm still warming up to it, but it's interesting to me. This is, of course, an elevated, different sort of model. It's not one of their standard production models, so to speak. The case is stainless steel, but the bezel itself is gem sets with baguette diamonds, in fact. And the dial is in natural malachite stone, so quite a beautiful looking piece. And of course, something like this in their usual presentation is right around $690. But this gem set version actually would set you back 9,750 in Swiss francs. So there's that. It's still early days. I will try to take a guess after I look at everything. I'll pull up two more. Louis Vuitton Tambour Convergence. This is kind of the scale-like display for hours and minutes. Pardon me. It's quite an elegant design, but I much prefer a genuine jump hour watch, honestly. I think this is a little bit of a contrived design or display for my taste, but again, I'm speaking from very much my personal opinion. When you look at contemporary jump hour pieces, without thinking, my mind goes to Anderson Genève, of which an example is presented as one of the competing watches, I think in the ladies' complication category. But there we are already with Tambour Convergence, which actually sets the closed parts of the dial with diamonds, apparently 795 diamonds at that, with a technique that's known as snow setting, where, as you can see, stones of differing sizes are set so closely next to each other that you can't see the setting, the base that they sit on. It's actually quite nice, at least on the picture here, and I'm sure it would be a delight on the eyes in real life as well. This is a piece that's listed at 59,000 Swiss francs, including VAT. 37 millimeter platinum case. And then we have the classic Voutilainen. This is a 28 CG, 37 millimeter pink gold case. That's a new design, as you can see. It's a very it diverges quite a bit from their usual teardrop style case design with a sort of extended lug look. But otherwise, when you look at the face of the watch, it's very much Voutilainen watch. It exhibits all the different aspects of Kari Voutilainen's work, applied Breguet numerals, the observatory style hands, kind of like a bird beak look to me that I always found very cute and actually admirable. And three different types of guilloche. You have the circularly brushed minute track with pip every 5 minutes and with polished gold dots at the quarters. You have a basket weave pattern for the hour track, a wave pattern for the center dial, and then a very unique pattern that is for the oversized second subdial, kind of like a rosette, I guess you can say. Actually, I like those elements of Voutilainen's design, like the oversized second subdial, the oversized crown here, the oversized balance wheel that beats at a lower frequency, 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour. I think that's 2.5 hertz, if I'm not mistaken. And honestly, that's visually so appealing, you know, when you actually look at the movement. The larger balance wheel and the slower beat rate of the movement has this movement, expansion and contraction like movements to the balance wheel that makes it almost like a living organism, right? You know, it's as if it breathes. I always found that fascinating, and that's a technique or a trick, you might even say, but of the good sort, that a lot of independent makers use. Large balance wheels with, again, very nicely hand-finished balance bridges that are the beating heart of movements with lower frequency. Von Krul agrees with me, right? You know, that is what I like. That's a big, sexy balance wheel. Yeah, what was it? Mac Daddy. I like big butts and I cannot lie. One should make a horology remix of that. John C says cheap Breguet alternative. Unfortunately, it's for a time only Breguet. I think you you could probably save quite a bit of money. Yeah, by the way, I did call them observatory hands, but the observatory handset usually just has the hour hand with that loop and a much finer tip. It's there's a different aesthetic to this that I call, in a very geeky, nerdy way, bird's beak. That's just something I made up to amuse myself. I've not heard that sort of terminology from anyone. I think they simply call that handset themselves observatory, but it is quite different than a standard set of observatory hands. Um, they simply call it observatory, right? You know, I'm just trying to amuse myself with that description. So if it was misleading in any way, I do apologize. So this watch in the ladies category appeals to me a lot, but probably is not necessarily feminine enough to be deemed worthy a winner in this category. I do think that it will probably make it to the final list, to the list of actual nominees, which I think are usually capped at half a dozen. So out of these, more than 2 dozen watches, I think, are already in the ladies category. Um, you know, 2/3 of them, pardon me, are going to be eliminated immediately. Um, but yeah, I like the materials used. I like the techniques of hand finishing, both on the dial and the mechanism. Um, you know, I like the aesthetics of the watch. I'm, you know, I actually appreciate that they have a new case design now, even though I think the, you know, teardrop plugged classic case of the Van Uit, you know, the classic 28 is, to me, very beautiful, and I wouldn't want to have it any other way if I were aspiring to a Voutilainen watch. But I'm glad they have this design now, in addition to their cushion shaped case that they have recently used for their World Timer watches. I'm glad that there is more than a variation on a single theme now. And this watch is priced at 125,000 Swiss francs. Yeah, and I think, you know, here again, it's really thinking so far ahead, but I can certainly see the Jarajanta possibly winning in this category, or the Tambour Convergence or Convergence, whatever you want to call it. Um, I think the Voutilainen would make it to the final. I think the Piaget, Louis Vuitton, Jarajanta, possibly also Bulgari and AP might round out the actual list of nominees. But then again, there are some other interesting pieces that are more feminine, and you know, I don't see. Yeah, there might be a completely different list. My guesses are a little bit better once they whittle it down to the half a dozen list of actual nominees. So we'll see. We'll see. There's a ladies complication category, and that has only 8 entries. They have been a little more judicious this time. I will go through some of the interesting ones to me. And again, as always, please feel free to give me any suggestions if you have any requests, any other watch-related questions. I always try to do my best to respond. And if you want to highlight them, sending them in a super chat is always, of course, better. And it keeps the lights on for me. I would very much appreciate that. There's a Code 1159 self-winding flying tourbillon here. They have that stamped guilloche style finish that has been really popular, and that I have been very critical in the past. I still am. I think for a legacy maker like AP at these price points, it's almost inexcusable to have a stamped dial. But what do I know? This is a sand gold case, 38 millimeters in diameter. So the smaller version of the Code 1159 case. It is set with brilliant cut diamonds. On its lugs and the flying tourbillon, and on the crown, by the way, as well. And the movement that powers it is actually the ultra thin RD number 3 movement, caliber 2968. So you have actually a very compact, interesting version of an 1159 watch, 38 millimeters in diameter, 9.6 millimeters in thickness, and this new alloy of gold that they are preserving usually for either limited editions or very niche pieces in their collection. Mind you, it's become quite popular for any brand to come up with alloys that don't really differ much from the usual thing. They're just a branding opportunity. Some brands, for example, when talking about 18 karat pink gold, some people say Everrose, others say red gold, others say king gold, and whatever. Sand gold, I really like, but it's not like it's not discovering a new continent. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's essentially this beige shade of gold that's somewhere between white and yellow, right? But to me, it's a very pleasant aesthetic. But again, your mileage might vary. I think it's very low key for a gold piece, but it exudes a certain warmth that you can only get from that sort of precious metal. The reference here is, to shorten it, 26665 SG, as in sand gold. It's the Code 1159 flying tourbillon, self-winding, with the ultra-thin RD3 movement, and it's priced at 161,100 in Swiss francs. The Hermes cut basically builds on the success of the H08. It's the more feminine, more diminutive, integrated bracelets / sporty watch that they have released. I think it was last year, if not the year before then, but I may have forgotten. A very unique complication that they have used before in their Arceau case. And it's I'm blanking on the name of the workshop that made the movement that came up with this complication, that designed this complication for Hermes. I think it was Agenoa. I think it was Agenoa, the Jean-Marc Wiederrecht has come up with it. Basically, it's a pusher here at 8 o'clock that allows you to suspend time, right? You know, it kind of has this butterfly effect where the hour and minute hands kind of come together in this nook around 12 o'clock, and time is suspended by that. Robert Wood says, surprised to see a micro brand Denison there. They have some beautiful stone dials. Yeah, I have one, Robert, by the way. I can show it later in the broadcast if there's any interest. But yeah, going back to that idea, Robert, all it takes at this stage, because it's the long list, because it's the list of competing watches, is to fill out a form and submit it with $800 deposit. And I think if your watch makes it to the list of final nominees, you send them an example of the watch to be examined and exhibited, and you pay another 7,500 Swiss francs to officially enter the competition. So, you know, to a certain extent, it's like pay for play. But fair enough, that's the way most award competitions go, right? You know, if you have to submit a product, whether it's a movie or something like this, it's almost always you have to submit an example of that product, the recording of the movie, so on and so forth, and also pay some sort of fee for the competition. Von Krul says, the Fire Opal Janta, this was the Gentissima Oursin, and a competing watch in the ladies category, is really something. Can't wear it, but it's beautiful. Yeah, it's not, there are more unisex versions of the Oursin, by the way, that are less fiery. Still, it's not the most masculine watch around, so I understand. Von Krul, coming, you know, we were talking about the code 1159 when it comes to this. Yeah, it doesn't look the same, right? You know, you don't even have to submit it under a microscope or even look at it with the loop. You know, if your eye is trained enough, you will know what's hand guilloche, what's stamping, what's CNC. It's not impossible, and you know, it's, some of this is almost objective, right? You know, if you have a rough idea of what you're looking at, if you have seen a true guilloche dial at least a couple of times, right? You know, you don't have to have decades of training or research behind it. You will see how underwhelming a stamp dial is in comparison to hand guilloche, right? It's I don't know. To most watch enthusiasts, I don't even have to describe this in detail. There's something that we get from craftsmanship. There's something that we get from the final product of something that is organically crafted or at least finished by the human hand. That's not replicated with stamping. I'm sorry. I mean, while you're at it, 3D print the watch. Why not? Right? Who cares? once the design is realized, it's easy as pie, right? But it doesn't work that way. So I don't know. My perspective on watchmaking, I think most people who have just the standard appreciation of mechanical watches should be able to tell the difference, and it's a seriously inferior product when you have a stamp dial compared to a hand guilloche. So the time only is a relatively new category, but I think it's a very relevant category because of the trend in independent watchmaking and beyond of investing in these kinds of models. And as you can see, there are 12, 15, 18 competing watches in that category. I will have you look at the first 6. I have to grab more water, so I'll be right back. I'll keep talking. I'll put this on my table here. So time only is different than, at least in name, it's a separate category than best men's or women's watch, even though, as you have seen, there's a lot of overlap. But essentially what you're looking at is a set of 2 or 3 handers. Once again, you see the Denison Collectability Edition. So there's a competing entry there. This was a limited edition, quite affordable, by the way. I think these were around 600 or maybe also 690. A 2-tone sunburst dial that is inspired by the 2-tone blue dials of vintage Pateks. Collectability, as you know, is a dealer that specializes in Patek, and especially vintage and new vintage Patek, but really Patek more broadly. That's led by John Reardon. They have already sold out of it, so it's a little might be a little disappointing for people who might still potentially go after it. The Daniel Roth Extra Plat Rose Gold is one of my favorites. I'm wearing a Daniel Roth as well, so I'm a little biased. But I was actually quite surprised and positively surprised by the fact that they went after this particular genre of watches, because Daniel Roth in his previous interviews has always said that when he was still working in Audemars Piguet's service department, it was sometimes the simplest watches and the ultra-thin dress watches that gave him most pleasure to work on, to work with. So for them to honor that legacy, and Daniel Roth again made some beautiful time-only watches, in addition to the tourbillon wristwatch and the chronographs and the perpetual calendars he made in his true independent era. I think this was very interesting for them to explore. It's under $50,000. Sorry, 50,000 VAT included in Swiss francs, and it's a hand-wound movement, 35.5 by 38.6, so quite wearable, and an ultra-thin hand-wound movement. as you can see here on the back. One of my favorites in that category. I actually like the Creedor as well. Some of you might know again that this is kind of the ultra high-end brands of the Seiko group. But in this case, it's a watch that's very actually very reasonably priced, but also kind of has a very throwback quality, right? You know, it almost looks like a vintage yellow gold dress watch, to be honest. And probably that's exactly what they aimed at. 37 millimeters in diameter, 7.65 millimeters in thickness, apparently. Has an ultra thin mechanical movement that powers it. It's a two-hander called Gold Feather. Very no fuss, no muss, simple piece. Not sure if it would be award worthy, but I thought it's worth highlighting, at least as a watch in this category. And, you know, when you're making a time-only watch, I think, you know, it behooves to create something sleek, thin, and if possible, ultra thin, right? I know it doesn't have to be a dress watch necessarily, but I think it needs to be something slick, something ultra thin, something that should really slide under a long sleeve or under a shirt cuff, so on and so forth. So this is the Creedor Gold Feather UTD, and it's priced at 29,000 Swiss francs including the VAT. And again, it has a certain throwback quality. It really looks like a vintage dress watch, so it might not appeal to everybody. Like the ultra thin hands, the extended simple baton applied markers, the kind of domed quality to the dial. It almost looks like something that comes right out of the 70s. But perhaps that's why I kind of liked it and wanted to highlight it for that reason. I like the Tonda PF. Gotta highlight that in some way. Micro rotor. Again, simple two-hander. No dates, no other interruptions on the dial. With the abbreviated markers, it's even more minimalist. Just the medallion logo and a kind of subtle grained finish on an ice blue dial, executed all in tight platinum. So a rather hefty watch, considering that it's also a bracelet watch. I like it. I've been a big fan of the Tonda PF. Clearly, not enough to go after one, to be fair, but it's certainly worth another look. This is a 25-piece limited edition, priced at 85,000 in Swiss francs. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Probably, you're right, Von Kroll. I agree about the Daniel Roth, and the Platinum Ton de PF is probably quite heavy. But you know, it's a beautiful looking watch. At least in theory, it looks great. For me, I was surprised that I liked this, and I know Ralph Lauren watches usually tank worse than many other brands, but this one looked absolutely stunning in person as well. I actually had a chance to look at this. Kind of has a different attempt at a California dial, so to speak, right, where you have Arabic numerals at the quarters, but Roman numerals otherwise, and kind of inscribed Arabic numerals in a concentric circle for 24 hours. Real turquoise stone dial, and a very ornate sterling silver case that's finished like a Western piece of jewelry. This is the RL Western cushion from the American Western collection for Ralph Lauren. Pardon me. Even the leather strap itself is, has that sort of working and burnishing into it that gives the watch a very interesting kind of character. With Breguet hands, I think it's like a Piaget movement inside. There's no exhibition case back, but it's a self-winding movement that's called RL514, made by Piaget exclusively for Ralph Lauren. Very special piece, but quite expensive for a time-only watch that you would buy from Ralph Lauren, I guess, unless you are really invested in this design, in this aesthetic, which you might be because it's very unique. And there must be a watch enthusiast who would love this piece. The fact that it's in sterling silver is pretty unique, right? It's hard to find silver watches, from contemporary makers. The cushion case design I really like as well, 42 millimeters in diameter, apparently. And the turquoise stone dial, I think, fits beautifully with this Western jewelry theme. And the price is 26,000 Swiss francs, including the VAT. So those are kind of my favorites in the time-only category. I can certainly see, again, the Daniel Roth making to the final. Probably Mink will also be part of the official nominated watches list. They're the darlings of watch media, and a lot of the people who make these selections are some of your favorite quote-unquote influencers. So they'll probably put Ming in there. I think Ralph Lauren will most certainly make it to the final, even though it might not appeal to the taste of the average person. Raoul Pagès has Louis Vuitton as his patron, so that will probably also make the final cut. Beyond that, I can't say much. The men's watch category is a little more adventurous than the time-only one, precisely because there's a time-only category that is dedicated to those watches. I'll just share a few personal favorites for that reason, without necessarily implying that they should win. But as you can see, this is a very long list. What is it? 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 20, 25 watches. I think the Zenit GFJ Caliber 135 is very interesting. Caliber 135, of course, has become reiterated and kind of embraced as a different aspect of Zenit's heritage. And I do admire that, you know, for someone like me who bashes Zenit endlessly for making watches that are essentially copies of other brands. I have to give them credit where it's due, where they actually tap into their own heritage, which is quite rich. And part of their heritage, beyond uh, coming up with one of the first integrated self-winding chronograph movements in the world, is having made observatory quality, chronometrically precise movements. And the Caliber 135 was one of those movements that won an immense number of chronometry prizes, I think to the tune of more than 2,000. So it's very, very prestigious heritage that this particular movement has. And I think it was in 2022, there was like a three-way collaboration between the Philips auction house, Kari Voutilainen, and Zenit, where they used new old stock versions of these movements for the first time in a series of wrist watches. I think it was like 10 plus 1 pieces. And the 135O were actually like the kinds of movements that were sent in wooden boxes to the observatories to be tested and trialed. So their use for the wristwatch required some modification and certainly a lot of interesting finishing from Kari Voutilainen as well. You should check those out. By the way, I made a small mistake. Apparently, the 2,000 plus number are the number of chronometry awards that were won by Zenit. The 135O in and of itself won 235 chronometry prizes, which is still quite a lot. The GFG is 106, kind of like a 160th anniversary piece for Zenit as well. It's a 160 piece limited edition. It's named after their founder, Georges Favre Jacot, GFJ. Platinum piece, 39 millimeters in diameter and 10.5 millimeters in thickness. A very cool multi-faceted dial. The center of the dial is lapis lazuli. The second subdial is like a blue tinted mother of pearl, and there is like a brick gear-shaped pattern for the minute track, which is yet another shade of blue. So a very interesting piece. The movement itself also, I think, has a very industrial and minimalist look, but a very nice finish, a very cool finish, if I might say so. And again, you have a lower beat frequency and a high power reserve on this hand wound movement, which looks quite nice. Von Krull, thank you so much. Bruce G says for the previous Western style cushion watch by Ralph Lauren, you need the matching belt buckle. Absolutely, absolutely. That watch is a vibe, man. I mean, I can't imagine paying more than $30,000 for a Ralph Lauren watch, but that was a very special piece. Yeah, I really like this one as well. And this is part of the men's selection, limited series of 160 pieces for this platinum dress watch with a COSC certified chronometer movement that is a remaking of the legendary caliber 135, and the price, including VAT, is 48,900 in Swiss francs. Yeah, I like it. I like it. Again, it's a very industrial type of decoration, right? You know, it's not intricate handwork or anything, but it's a cool looking watch, I think, inside and out. I've seen these in person, and you know, this is like a rendering. That dial looks even more variegated, even more vivid, even more lively in person. And you know, it's like everyone likes a blue dial, but this practically has all different shades of blue, so it would probably please you if you are a blue dial fanatic. Pardon me. And you know, again, at that price point, you know, if you can swing more than $50,000 for a time-only watch, chances are you're a collector of independent makers, and maybe you got on the train before it became a hype train, so on and so forth. But you know, this is actually a very interesting and enticing watch if you manage to get your hands in one of the 160 examples. You have the more plain Jane version of the Louis Vuitton piece in pink gold. And the price point, of course, comes all the way down to 32,500 for this guichet style scale like time telling device. I like the Laurent Ferrier pieces. This is a very nice ice blue dial with a vertical brushed finish with some snailing on the second subdial. Their date window is an acquired taste. Some people find it too extravagant and even more distracting than a standard cutout. I think it does go some way in creating some sort of visual balance on the dial. I would still like to see it go away in most instances, and this is not much different. But I like their case designs. There's, again, like, you know, there's a certain organic quality to it, right? You know, it's as if, you know, their standard case is called galet, right? You know, like a pebble, as if it's kind of this piece of stone that's shaped, rounded out by the passage of time and you know, the work of water, etc. So there's that romantic quality to it a little bit. I always like them. And again, I like, compared to a standard date window, I like something like this where they have clearly done the design work to achieve some sort of balance. But still, I think I would rather not. but it is what it is. And it ain't what it ain't, which is not a no date watch. This is in stainless steel, 40 millimeters, so kind of like the modern um, dress watch dimensions. And again, it's right under 50,000 in Swiss francs, so not cheap by any means. Another watch that I wanted to look at here because it's different is the Fears Jump Hour Edwardian edition. Um, this was a piece that they first released as a limited edition for the for what was it, um, British Watch and Clock Makers' Guild, or Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers, or something like that, of which they're of course a part. And that's an initiative that brings together um, anywhere from brands like Fears and Christopher Ward, as well as independent makers like Roger Smith. And I think it was Roger Smith um, who was behind the initiative initially to start something like this. This Edwardian edition is part of a 10-piece limited series. Speaking of which, we were just talking about the Ralph Lauren Western watch, which was much more ornate, of course, but also featured uh, cushion case. This is also a cushion case, and incidentally also rendered in sterling silver, although here it's much more polished. It's their classic Brunswick collection with a hand-polished white lacquer dial, a classic jump hour piece. And I think the aesthetics of the jump hour here are both rather minimalist, but also quite nice for that reason. You know, I like how they have come up with this orb-like design for the minutes and the jump hour. Um, I like the fonts they have chosen. I like how simple the watch looks. Um, and it's quite gorgeous, and it's it's a decent price point. Again, not exaggerated. It's 5,500, including VAT in Swiss francs. So it's not outrageous. And I believe, speaking of the alliance of British watchmaking, um, the jump hour movement here is um, aided by a module developed by Christopher Ward, right? So there's a self-winding Sellita SW200 movement as the base, and then the jump hour module is JJ01, developed by Christopher Ward. Masa's pastime is something that I wanted to draw attention to. This is a Japanese watchmaker, um, Japanese independent watchmaker that has specialized in the restoration of antique timepieces for over 3 decades. But they have also started making their own watches since 2023. And Sokoku is part of that effort. They have an in-house movement, manufactured, finished, and assembled entirely in their own workshop. Um, their own pink gold case that has a very interesting mid case here that somehow plays beautifully with the colors of the dial as well. Again, a very unique guilloche pattern of that, how should I say, ink blue dial. I don't actually know what kind of material they use for the dial. I don't think the description specifies that. The Arabic numerals are hand engraved on the dial and rendered in a pink gold tone. The hemp leaf motif, as they call it, is actually engraved using a hybrid technique. It says that blends Japanese and Western engraving traditions. So I'm guessing it's probably still with a rose lathe. So it's still guilloche, but perhaps it includes some aspect of hand finishing. I don't exactly know. I would love to learn. And apparently the same kind of pattern is also on the balance bridge. And the movement itself has a lot of hand finished elements and frosted bridges and mirror polished steel components too. All edges and jewel settings are hand chamfered with anglage. The main plate is decorated with classic perlage. So you can see how the architecture and finishing of the movement even is somehow influenced by classic horological design as well. Of course, there are those special details like the decoration of the balance cock, as one says, right? That's apparently the same pattern as the dial. It kind of looks like lattice work when you go closer. The hands are very ornate and not exactly my taste. Kind of a tulip shape to them, honestly, with extended tips. But I don't know. It kind of fits the aesthetic of the watch, right? You know, kind of lattice work pattern in guilloche. The unique font chosen for the Arabic numerals. You know, it's its own thing, and for that reason, I kind of like it. Not for me, but interesting. Um, 38 millimeters in diameter for this unique case that combines 18 karat pink gold and that shakudo detail that kind of has black blue effects. Only 10 millimeters thick, and the price point is 68,500 roughly in Swiss francs. Yeah, it's, I mean, again, I can't bash them for being unique. I think I would push for them to be included in the final for something like this. The Chopard LUC Quattro Mark IV is great too. Again, platinum with that beautiful um, ice blue dial. the 4 series coupled barrels that give the watch 216 hours of power reserve. It's quite cool. And again, very wearable for a watch like this. 39 millimeters for the diameter, 10.4 millimeters for the thickness. The price point is 45,500. And the Urban Jorgensen piece here, I think, might turn some heads. At some point, I would like to talk about the revival of the brand, but not before I actually see the watches in person. But the UJ2 is a very interesting watch for me. I like the dial design because of its slightly off-kilter, quirky layout, right? Where the main dial seems to be sitting on an upward-facing crescent. You have, again, an oversized subdial for seconds that's also off-center. Roman numerals, but with a 0 at 12 o'clock. That's very unique. Power reserve indicator, again. It's a very unique case design. It's a very interesting and exciting dial layout. I'm intrigued, honestly, as much by the case and dial design as also by the movement, which features a double wheel natural escapement, in and of itself pretty interesting. The movement is finished at a level where you would expect from an independent watchmaker. Whether, again, I can't say this before I see the watches at hand, but the price point reflects, of course, all these different details. And for UJ2, which is one of the competing watches in the men's category, that price, including VAT, is 113,500 in Swiss francs. The piece is in pink gold, 39 millimeters in diameter, and it's a smidgen thinner than 11 millimeters in thickness. There's something like a tension in the design that I actually appreciate, because when you look at the dial, no matter how off kilter it is, there's a very classical Breguet-like quality to it. And Urban Jorgensen, after all, was one of the students of Abraham Louis Breguet, right? So a watch brand that honors his name better have those classical elements. Yet, both the case design and those off-kilter, off-center aspects of the dial layout and dial design brings this watch into a very playful tension, gives it a very unique energy. And I like that. From far, at least, it's very intriguing. I do need to see it in person to pass final judgment on it, but it's a very interesting proposition. Of course, this recent revival of Urban Jorgensen is funded by an American family. However, it's also led by Kari Voutilainen himself. So, they certainly, for that reason, if for that reason only, deserve a look. I don't have much time left today, so I don't want to dip into these different categories, but I will very quickly name some interesting pieces to earmark them for tomorrow. Men's complication is, of course, to a nerd, to a nerdy man like me. It's one of the more interesting. My favorite, Anderson Genève, has a jumping hour piece that they collaborated on with Asprey, with a Burma jade dial. What a stunning, stunning piece there. A platinum case. Bar none, I think they're the most interesting jump hour watchmakers in the contemporary time, and certainly deserve a similar mention in the world time category as well. I'm a big fan of the 150th anniversary limited edition for the Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar, for sure. Beauvais Recital 30 World Time, I find very interesting and want to talk about it tomorrow again. Laurent Ferrier's Classic Traveler Globe Night Blue. Aesthetically, I really like it. Again, it's a very beautiful travel time watch. Nayo Hida's new perpetual calendar offering, and Urban Jurgensen's perpetual calendar. Again, building on that same case design, but of course, a very, very different watch. A more complicated watch to begin with. The Iconic has the classic version of the Anderson Genève World Time, as you can see. A Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar is part of that too. Again, one of my favorites here. Bulgari and MBNF collaboration on quote unquote a Serpenti for men. That's also something to look at tomorrow. I love that the Hanhat 417 has made it at least to the list of competing watches here, one of Steve McQueen's own favorites. So that's always interesting to look at there. The GMT Rattrapante by Parmigiani Fleurier also made it here. This is a stainless steel piece with that platinum bezel that has a knurled finish and that jade colored dial, although of course it's a guilloche dial. And the Tudor Pelagos Ultra and Tag Heuer Formula One Solargraph also somehow made it here. I don't quite understand that. But hey, I don't think Tudor Pelagos can be called iconic yet. It hasn't lived enough to jump into that category. And Tag Heuer's Formula One watch, I mean, no matter how emblematic it is of their connection to Formula One, I'm not sure again if it even belongs there. But then again, it seems like they have really been lax about what to include in this particular category. The tourbillon category is always interesting. I think the Octo Finissimo Ultra tourbillon, because of how thin it is, the Antarctique, Chapek Antarctique tourbillon, because of the architectural layout of the dial. The Urban Jurgensen tourbillon, again, because of its remontoire at the very least. Mechanical exception is a fascinating category. again, usually distinguished by particularly finely engineered regulatory mechanisms or unique complications. So a lot of interesting watches that I would like to talk about tomorrow, but it's hard to fit them into a single category, right? I would love to talk about the Luca Soprana, Derek Pratt Remontoire d'égalité. I would like to talk about the Grobel Forcé Nanofoudroyant. I'll talk about the Armin Strom dual-time GMT resonance. So there's a lot to examine in that category as well. Chronograph is very self-explanatory. Andes Saint-Genève actually has a world time chronograph, which I have been clamoring for. Not sure if this was what I had in mind, but that's something that we can talk about later. The Monaco Rattrapante, I think when I first saw the example of it that they submitted to the Only Watch auction, I was very impressed by it. I would love to talk about it. I was really surprised that one hadn't been made before. It almost seems, again, self-evident that Monaco should have something like that, but we didn't have it until a few years back. Sports watch, again, it's a very self-explanatory category, but I don't know, maybe it's my fatigue from this category. I can't see something that I would want to immediately highlight, but I'm sure we'll find something by tomorrow. The jewelry category is relatively new. No, it's not relatively new as well, but I always found it hard to vibe with, even though I am much more interested in jam set watches than I was, say, 5 to 10 years ago. The Simon Brett Chronomètre Artisan has a great emerald themed example here, also lavishly decorated with diamonds as well. That's something we'll most certainly highlight, if nothing else. Maybe also the Bulgari Serpenti Eterna. The artistic crafts category, again, has something that might appeal to everyone because artistic crafts broadly defined. You have the Royal Oak Double Balance Open Worked in that shade of blue ceramic that they have been trying to manufacture for so long, and that takes inspiration from their original tapisserie dial for the Royal Oak, namely the Bleu Nuit Nuage 50. I think that's here both for the open working and that particular color and finishing of ceramic integrated bracelet watch. Chopard's LUC Quattro Spirits jump hour piece is because of the wooden marqueterie dial, for example. The Hermès Arceau for, again, the marqueterie dial that uses or combines rather horsehair engraving and painting all at once, which is very interesting. And the kind of craziness that only a brand like Hermès would dabble in. The Kudoke 5 kind of has a jumbo version of their unique 24-hour display of day and night, sun and moon, that I really like. I would like to talk more about that. It has this category has the Louis Vuitton, an example of the Louis Vuitton automaton watch, and so much else. You know, enamel dials, different categories and approaches of gem setting, and micro painting. So that's a very interesting category as well. Two categories that are always of immense interest to the widest group of people, and not only people who like budget shopping for only, are the petite aiguille, which is for anything less than I think 10,000 Swiss francs, anything between 3,000 to 10,000 Swiss francs, and then anything less than 10,000, anything less than 3,000 goes into the challenge category. So in both of these categories, I'll try to talk about as many watches as possible. So that should be very interesting. And then another category that might be difficult to talk about, but always has interesting machines, is the mechanical clock. And usually I like the aesthetic of L'Epée, which was an independent brand recently acquired by Louis Vuitton as well. But there are so many others that have this sculptural, artistic, or objet d'art quality that you can't always find in a wristwatch. So I look forward to talking about those two tomorrow. So with those options earmarked, I will bid my farewell for tonight. And again, I appreciate those of you who took part in the chat, who came up with questions, suggestions, shared their comments and insights as well. I always appreciate it. That is good enough support. It helps even more if you like. If you haven't subscribed yourself, for sure, please subscribe, but also share the link with other collectors and fellow watch enthusiasts. I have grown my Instagram account quite significantly in the last few months, but I want to bring that kind of growth here onto YouTube as well. And I hope with your help, I will be able to do that. I want to also add that, again, the cash flow that I get from YouTube, even if it is minimal when you individually contribute, helps me a lot, and certainly encourages me, but also almost automatically increases the quality and quantity of my work on this channel. So I want to thank again Von Krul for his contribution today. If you want to contribute as well, feel free to use any of the options that YouTube allows you, whether it's super chats, whether it's the version of super chats that you can give with your comments. I think they call it super thanks. The memberships, which you can buy for yourself and gift onto others, gives you access to a nice archive of exclusive content that has a lot of insights on the secondary market for watches, and especially specific videos dedicated to genres, brands, complications, so on and so forth. So feel free to check those out. If you want to contribute in other ways, there are links in the video description that might always help. If nothing else, again, please share the link with everyone else. If you don't follow me on Instagram already, do that. Again, even though my focus is at this moment growing YouTube more than Instagram, you never know where traffic comes from. So feel free to follow me there as well if you are not already. With that, I will close for today. I'll be back with the same topic tomorrow for at least another 2 hours. And I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. I'll see you in the next one.